They were popping vintage champagne in the golden sunlight, toasting to my sister's genius. I was sitting 40 feet away in the shadows of the service entrance, tasked with guarding the gift table like hired help. My mother told me it was about aesthetics. My sister told me I wasn't successful enough to sit with the VIP investors. But they forgot one critical detail. They forgot who actually paid for the champagne. They forgot who paved the road they were standing on. And most importantly, they forgot that I don't get mad. I get even. They thought I was the help, but they forgot I was the source. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The timeline rewinds to 45 minutes earlier. I pulled my sedan up to the wrought iron gates of the Kensington estate. The valet looked past me, scanning for Bentleys and G-Wagons, until I handed him a $300 tip for the catering staff. That was the first sign. In this world, you are either the show or the wallet. I had always been the wallet. I walked toward the white marquee tents billowing in the breeze. The air smelled of jasmine and money. This was the launch party for Sierra's luxury skincare line, a vanity project I had quietly engineered from the ground up to keep my parents off my back about supporting the family dream. I reached the entrance, smoothing down my tailored blazer. Then I saw my mother, Cynthia. She wasn't waiting to greet me with a hug. She was waiting to intercept me. She stepped out from behind a floral archway like a border patrol agent, blocking my view of the main tables where Sierra and Nathan were holding court. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my professional attire with disdain. "You made it," she said, her voice tight. "But Grace, look at you. We talked about the aesthetic. This is a garden party, not a board meeting. You stick out like a sore thumb." She didn't ask how my 80-hour workweek had gone. She grabbed my elbow and steered me away from the photographers, down a gravel path toward the service entrance. There, tucked into a dark alcove next to the catering trash bins, was a metal folding table. One chair. No tablecloth. It was the kind of setup you give to a vendor you forgot to pay. "We're just so tight on space in the VIP section," she said, not even bothering to make the lie convincing. "And honestly, we need someone we trust to watch the gift table. There are some very important checks in that pile. You understand, don't you? You're so good at being in the background." I stared at the metal chair. In any other context, I would have laughed and walked out. But I didn't. I almost sat down. And that is the trap. I realized then that to them, I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was a household appliance. You don't thank your toaster for making toast. You expect it. It is a utility. You only notice the toaster when it burns the bread or refuses to turn on. For 28 years, I had been their high-performance appliance. Reliable. Silent. Essential. But today, the appliance was about to malfunction. I sat down. The metal bit into my spine, a cold, tactile reminder of my place in this hierarchy. The catering staff stared at me with pity, but I didn't want their pity. I wanted a signal. While Sierra was laughing in the sunlight, unaware that her entire empire was built on a foundation of sand, I reached into my bag and pulled out my secure work phone. "My name is Grace, I am the Director of Global Biologistics. I control supply chains that move delicate, life-saving materials across continents. And right now, a fleet was moving specifically for Sierra. 3 cargo jets were currently cruising over the Atlantic. 20 refrigerated trucks were idling at distribution centers in 3 states. Inside them sat $12.5 million worth of rare bioingredients. The raw material for Sierra's entire product line. It was a favor I had pulled. A logistical miracle I had funded. I opened the fleet management interface. My thumb hovered over the override command. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a breach of contract termination. They had violated the unwritten clause of our partnership, mutual respect. I typed in the code red. The screen flashed. Status updated. Locked. Grounded. Return to base. I sent one text to my operations center, cancel everything. Burn the schedule. Breach of character. I placed the phone face down on the folding table. I poured myself a glass of lukewarm water from the pitcher the waiters had left for me. I watched the bubbles settle. Now, I just had to wait for the scream. It took exactly 90 seconds for the shockwave to travel from the operations center to the Kensington estate. I watched Nathan pull his phone from his linen jacket pocket, probably expecting a congratulations text or a stock update. Instead, his brow furrowed. He tapped the screen aggressively, swiping refresh as if he could scrub away the reality staring back at him. Then he looked up. His eyes scanned the garden, bypassing the investors, the friends, the adoring fans, until they locked onto me in the shadows. He didn't look worried. He looked furious. He stormed across the lawn, weaving through the white-clothed tables, his face a mask of indignation. Sierra followed him, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, her perfect smile faltering. Nathan stopped in front of my folding table, looming over me, blocking out the sun. "What did you do?" he hissed, keeping his voice low to avoid a scene. "I just got a notification. The fleet is grounded. The system says administrative lock. Fix it now." He bypassed why completely. In his mind, I wasn't a partner with a grievance. I was tech support. I was a malfunctioning server that needed a reboot. I looked up at him, my expression blank. "It's not a glitch, Nathan," I said, my voice calm enough to cut glass. "I revoked the clearance. The trucks aren't moving. The jets are turning around. Are you insane?" Sierra chimed in, her voice shrill. "This is my launch party, Grace. You're ruining the aesthetic because you're jealous that I'm in the spotlight and you're back here with the trash bins. It's pathetic." "Fix the shipping," Nathan commanded, pointing a finger at my face. "Do it now, or I'll tell everyone how incompetent you are. Arguments are inefficient." I picked up my phone and pressed the speaker button. "Ben," I said clearly. "You're on speaker." My VP of Operations voice filled the small alcove, crisp and professional. "Go ahead, Grace. Terminate the Kensington contract immediately," I said, looking Nathan dead in the eye. "Cite the character clause. Irreconcilable breakdown of trust. Effective immediately." "Copy that," Ben replied. "Contract voided. Fleet is returning to base." "You can't do that," Nathan screamed, forgetting to whisper. "We have a deal. You can't just cancel $12 million worth of logistics because your feelings are hurt." "I just did," I replied. Before he could lunge, a shadow fell over the table. The crowd parted, not for Nathan, but for a man walking with the kind of quiet authority that makes room noises cease. It was Alexander, the billionaire venture capitalist they had been trying to woo for months. He had arrived via helicopter, landing on the estate's private pad moments ago. The family preened, expecting him to join the VIP section. Instead, he walked right past them. He didn't even look at my mother. He stopped in front of my folding table. "Grace?" Alexander said, his voice warm and confused. He extended a hand, ignoring the catering trash bins nearby. "I was looking for you at the head table. Why is the director of global biologistics sitting in the dark?" The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Nathan looked like he had swallowed glass. "Just handling some last-minute adjustments, Alexander," I said, shaking his hand without standing up. "Well," Alexander said, turning to look at Sierra with cold, flat eyes. "I hope you treated her well today. You do realize Grace is the only reason my firm even considered your proposal, right? We invest in infrastructure, not packaging. And she is the best infrastructure in the game." The color drained from Sierra's face so fast she looked like a ghost. The narrative they had built, that I was the charity case, the invisible sister, the lucky guest, had just been dismantled in 3 sentences. Alexander looked at the folding table, then back at me. This isn't a seat for a partner, he said quietly. It looks more like a seat for a servant. Sierra looked like a trapped animal. Her eyes darted from Alexander's disappointed face to the fleet status notification on Nathan's phone, then back to me. She needed a lifeline. She needed to prove to her biggest potential investor that this was just a misunderstanding, and not the systemic devaluation of his most critical business asset. She forced a smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. Alexander, you have it all wrong, she stammered, her voice rising an octave. We adore Grace. She hates the spotlight. That's all. We gave her this private table so she could relax. Look, she's even guarding the gifts. She pointed frantically to the pile of envelopes on the table next to me. The gift table I had been assigned to watch. See? Sierra said, a desperate edge creeping into her tone. The seed money checks are all here. Investors have been so generous today. Grace is just keeping them safe. Alexander raised an eyebrow. He reached down and picked up one of the thick cream-colored envelopes. It wasn't a wedding card. It was a legal document. He opened the flap and slid the contents out. I watched his eyes scan the page. His expression hardened. Grace, he said, his voice low. Did you know you're listed as the primary guarantor on this loan? I frowned. What loan? This isn't a donation, Alexander said, holding up the check. It's a promissory note. A loan from the Kensington Trust, secured against your personal assets. And it's signed by you. I stood up. The metal chair scraped loudly against the concrete. I snatched the document from his hand. I scanned the signature line. There it was. My name. In handwriting that looked suspiciously like my mother's. I grabbed the next envelope. And the next. They weren't gifts. They were loans. High-interest bridge loans from private lenders, all secured by my credit, my assets, my name. My parents hadn't seeded me by the gifts to keep me humble. They seeded me here to hide the crime. I looked up at my parents, who were now standing behind Sierra, their faces pale. You forged my signature, I whispered. It was just for bridge financing. My father shouted, his bluster returning. We were going to pay it back as soon as the line launched. We needed your credit rating. Yours is perfect. We did it for the family. For the family? I repeated. You put me in debt for millions to fund a party? Alexander set the document down on the folding table with a sound that felt louder than a gunshot in the hushed garden. Unethical business practices, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the lawn. Clause 4.1 of our investment agreement. Criminal misconduct voids all offers. He looked at Sierra with disdain. You didn't just lose your logistics. You lost your funding. My firm is pulling out effective immediately. Sierra swayed on her feet. You can't, she whispered. We launch tomorrow. The inventory is grounded, Alexander interrupted. And without my capital, you can't pay the release fees to get it moving again. It's over. My mother let out a strangled sob. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my blazer. Grace, please fix this. Tell Alexander you signed them. Tell him it's okay. We're family. You can't let your sister fail. I looked down at her hand on my arm. The same hand that had steered me to the folding table. The same hand that had forged my name to steal my future. I pulled my arm away. Screaming would be inefficient. Crying would be a waste of hydration. I simply picked up the stack of forged documents. I'm keeping these, I said. As evidence. You ungrateful little, my father started, stepping forward. I turned to Alexander. Thank you for clarifying things, I said. He nodded. Do you need a ride? I looked at the helicopter waiting in the field. I looked at the metal folding table. I looked at my family, standing in the ruins of their own greed. Yes, I said. I believe I do. I walked away. I didn't look back at the party. I didn't look back at the sister who wanted to be a queen or the parents who tried to make me a peasant. I walked toward the chopper, the blades starting to spin, whipping the air into a frenzy. Behind me, the shouting started, but I couldn't hear it. I was already gone. The next morning, the sun hit my desk at 7 o'clock, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the silence. It was the quietest my office had ever been. Usually, the morning of a major client launch is a war room. Phones ringing, dispatchers shouting, adrenaline spiking. Today, there was only the hum of the server banks and the steam rising from my black coffee. I looked at my monitors. The fleet was still grounded at the depot. 20 trucks sitting in neat, idle rows. On my personal phone, the notifications were stacking up in a silent, blocked folder. Hundreds of desperate calls from my mother, furious texts from Sierra, and panic-stricken voicemails from Nathan. The news cycle had already picked up the story of the failed Kensington launch. Without Alexander's backing, and without a supply chain, Sierra wasn't a visionary entrepreneur anymore. She was just a girl with a warehouse full of empty jars she couldn't fill. I looked at the idle trucks. I could have left them there. I could have let the bio-ingredients rot in the containers, dragging out the lawsuit and bleeding them dry until they were bankrupt. That would have been revenge. But revenge is just another form of attachment. It keeps you tied to the people you hate. I didn't want to be tied to them anymore. I wanted to be free. I pulled up the contact info for Project Horizon, a medical disaster relief nonprofit I had admired for years but never had the excess capacity to support because I was too busy propping up my family. They had been trying to move emergency medical supplies to a flood-ravaged region 2 states over but lacked the budget for a commercial cold chain fleet. I picked up the phone. "This is Grace from Global Bio," I told their director. "I have 20 refrigerated trucks and drivers ready to roll. I'm donating the entire logistics capacity. We can load your supplies by noon." The silence on the other end was stunned, followed by the sound of weeping. "Grace, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars in value." "It's a tax write-off," I said, smiling for the first time in days. "Consider it an investment in something real." As I authorized the new route, I thought about the names they were probably calling me right now. Selfish. Cruel. The villain of the family story. For years, I was terrified of that label. I bent over backward, emptied my bank account, and erased my own needs just to avoid being seen as the bad guy. But looking at the wreckage of their entitlement this morning, I realized something profound. The villain is just the name they give to the person who finally sets a boundary. If being the villain means I keep my dignity, my money, and my sanity, then I will wear that crown. I will be the best villain they have ever seen. Because the villain is the only one in the story who is truly free. I watched the screen as the fleet status changed from grounded to active. The trucks weren't moving Sierra's ego anymore. They were moving hope. I took a sip of coffee. The weight in my chest was gone, replaced by a clean, quiet sense of purpose. I wasn't the engine for their dysfunction anymore. I was the driver of my own life. If you've ever had to become the villain in someone else's story just to survive in your own, hit that like button and share this video. Let's remind the world that freedom is worth the price.